rather than always being in the secondary. And we want to make sure it's actually Jaime in saying that we are part of the Premier League, and that's really the desire that you will feel this afternoon, in the hope that the Philippines become part of again the world arena and be able to engage in it in a very competitive way, and be able to look maybe at the competitive study. I asked Bill earlier which one does he go by, and he said the World Economic Forum is a good gauge. And we look at it, and sometimes you look at it with one eye open, hoping that the Philippines advances. And I guess we are again well represented in the council here today because they have that in their heart. So thank you very much for joining us. As Chito has explained, the Inquirer meet the Inquirer Multimedia. You are going to be our third guest. We had Chairman Bautista earlier, and President Aquino prior to yours. So you're in good company, in other words. I think safe to say you're in good company. And I'd like to also thank you and thank Emmy and the team who thought of putting this together, because we really wanted it as public as possible. And we're going to be experiencing this not only because we're going to feel the traffic in the coming days, but really because it's our time for the Philippines to be able to showcase ourselves. No? So it'd be interesting to hear from you, just what APEC can be for the Philippines. So without further ado, I'll give you back to John. And again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Sandy. As Chito mentioned, this is the third edition of Inquirer Multimedia. Our first guest was Comelec Chairman Andy Bautista, and our second guest was the President of the Philippines. Now, I am deeply honored to introduce to you our special guests today. They are true leaders of the APEC business community. If I were to read their CVs, we're gonna take the whole hour. So let me just summarize very briefly. First of all, they are all members, together with Tony Tan Cactiong of Jollibee, of the Philippine delegation to APEC Business Advisory Council. They are led by the incumbent chair of the APEC Business Advisory Council, or ABAC, Doris Magsaysay Ho. She is, we all know her, but I think the title that will best describe her, aside from Group CEO of Magsaysay Group of Companies, is that she is also a well-known philanthropist. Joining her as one of the Philippine representatives is somebody who also does not need an introduction. So let me just very quickly introduce Jaime Augusto Zobel de Ayala. He is Chairman and CEO of Ayala Corporation, Board Chair of Bank of the Philippine Islands, and Globe Telecoms, among many other involvements. And last but certainly not least, somebody who in fact is very familiar to us in the media, somebody who has been engaging with us because of NAMFREL and then because of his position as Executive Director of the Makati Business Club. Now he has been co-chair since 2001 of the National Competitiveness Council, and in that capacity sits as alternate member of ABAC, Mr. Bill Luz. Okay, just one word, and then we'll get to the questions. One word about the format. We're going to start with a short statement from the chair, maybe just a minute to set the parameters of our discussion. After that, we will proceed to the questions. The questions will be divided into two parts. The first part will be moderated by our senior business reporter, Dax Lucas, and will be reserved for reporters and editors of PDI Business. That will run for about 20-25 minutes, and we will be using that clock as our gauge. And then after that, the remaining time, another 20 to 25 minutes, we will open it up to other questions from other members of the Inquirer platforms. So there's DZIQ, there's Inquirer.net, there's HIP, there's the other sections of PDI. And then after all of that, we're going to ask Mr. Zobel de Ayala to give us a closing synthesis, maybe about a minute and a half to 2 minutes, just to bring the discussion to a close.
1 minute.
All right, then. So, ladies and gentlemen, the chair of APEC Business Advisory Council, Doris Magsaysay Ho.
Thank you. Thank you so much, John. And I speak on behalf of Jaime and Bill and my colleagues here, Kathy Maceda, who's the executive director of the APEC chair of 2015, and our other colleagues. I want to thank Marixie and Charlie and also Sandy and all of the leaders from the Inquirer for having us here today. I think the fact that you're all here really is an amazing evidence to us how important it is to really have the media cover this very important event, especially now that the Philippines is really on everybody's mind as a great economy to invest in because it's one of the fastest growing in the region. It is a very opportune time for us to be hosting. And so we feel that this next week will be an important part to highlight what are the best parts of the Philippines. When we became chair, we really focused on what would be our contribution to the whole APEC system. So I would divide it in two things. One is, what is our contribution to the APEC structure system as a whole? And one is, as APEC Philippines, what do we want to leave? What do we want to learn from this experience to really prepare us all, as our country and our businesses, to be ready to face the opportunities that free trade brings? Because APEC and ASEAN and any of these regional integration efforts is all about opening markets to us. So it only becomes meaningful when we actually have something that we have very clearly in our minds to sell, whether goods or services. And that kind of effort to have strategies, how we position ourselves in this global market, becomes extremely important. And this hosting gives us the opportunity for everyone to sit back and think what it is that we want to go and excel in this world. Our themes for the overall APEC was really premised on where we can see the biggest potential for growth. As you know, APEC, this whole regional integration move, has really brought about huge growth in trade, huge growth in the middle class. But we wanted to see where we could find different areas of growth through regional integration. One of the themes that we put in is trade and services. So far, APEC has focused mostly on trade and goods, and we think as a country full of talent that we should really focus on an agenda on trade and services. The second one is this whole idea of inclusiveness, inclusive growth, and how we can bring more people from the broader sector of society into global trade. And so we have really pushed an agenda on the table, not as a separate agenda, but using our main thrusts of regional integration, improving connectivity, both institutionally, physically, and people to people, using those key messages from the business sector to include SMEs. And so we have a very robust agenda for SMEs, MSMEs, actually MSMEs, which include putting more MSMEs into global value chains, putting more SMEs into e-commerce, and putting more, and having a very clear innovation agenda across the region and in our economy. So these are the major thrusts that we feel that we have contributed to the APEC system. And we feel that the efforts we've done was also to engage the business community, especially in the service sector, to see how we can use all this to actually define a very thoughtful future for the Philippines and for our businesses and for our people in the years to come. Thank you.
All right, so we go to the questions. Let me call on senior business reporter Dax Lucas, who will moderate the first segment.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Ms. Doris Ho, long time no see. Okay, over lunch, I'd like to direct the first question to you. Over lunch, you made an impassioned appeal for a more coherent roadmap in the services sector. Now, let me just reprise my question for the benefit of our guests here. We've come a long way without having a roadmap. We're near the top of the league tables in many sectors. Why do we need a formal template?
Well, first of all, the services agenda is a very key one for the Philippines because we have one component of it that's really strategic, which is really vital in a services supply chain, a value chain, which is people. When you talk about trading goods, you talk about supply chains. When you talk about services, you talk about value chains. And in that value chain, you actually you have to have elements of understanding global standards, understanding global cultures, and these are things that, even languages. So we have that already, so we felt that was a very important thing that we can actually excel in. You asked why do we have to have roadmaps? Well, from all the experiences that we've had, the APEC actually meets 3 times a year in preparation for this meeting. So we are invited to different countries in the world. So this year we went to Hong Kong, Mexico, and Australia. And I can tell you, sitting there with all these other government officials and businesses, is that they have very clear ideas on what it is they're trying to achieve. It is not by fluke, it is not by a serendipitous thing. They actually have very clear ideas how they enter into other markets and what areas they will excel in. And I think for us, yes, we've done well, but even, let's say, the BPO industry success came about with a very clear roadmap from the beginning. They actually they actually presented a very long-term plan as to how to grow that sector. So we feel that we've identified, together with the National Competitiveness Council, we created a services coalition, and we identified certain industries where we would actually focus on. One was creatives, BPO, obviously, construction, what other ones? Maritime. So we've identified those, and we've actually met them and said, okay, let us create really long-term roadmaps. And so that way, we have a long-term view and a long-term memory, even when governments change.
Sorry, just to follow up. And these roadmaps you will be presenting will be implemented by which party? The government or the private sector?
Well, I think it's important to rally. I think that you cannot have development without trust. And one of the problems we have here is we all sort of look at each other with distrust, with the media or the church or the government and business. So what's good about having everybody work together? It's almost like these Philippines Inc. type of ideas, right? When everybody can believe that everyone is really after the growth, the rising tide raises all ships. So everybody works together towards so it's implemented all around. Right policies, right laws, right infrastructure, and business. In a way, it's like creating the path so business can move forward.
Understood. Thank you. Can we open the floor to the business section over here? Questions? Riza Olchondra, our energy reporter.
Thank you. To the APEC, I'm taking off from the earlier meetings of the APEC, focusing on the theme of inclusive growth and connectivity. How is the APEC working with the rest of the APEC officials on the themes of food, water, and energy, since we all agree that growth should redound ultimately to improving the lives of the people in the APEC economies? How does the APEC propose to address that?
As you might imagine, on APEC, there's just a lot of ground to cover. And let me just start off by saying that I think Doris deserves a big pat on the back, because people forget, and most people don't understand, that actually she's not just chaired a Philippine APEC initiative, but actually is being representative for all the APEC countries globally. So there's been a unique opportunity for the Philippines under Doris's leadership to actually set an agenda that's useful to the Philippines. Now, having said that, you've mentioned a number of areas that are important, and I think another thing that is not fully understood, is that we've been a host country this year to a number of different ministerial gatherings. Many of those revolved around the topics. I personally attended the ministerial gathering on energy and the topics there, but there have been a number of other ones. And let me just focus here on two that I've worked in together with Bill. We worked as a team on this, and Doris mentioned a couple of key themes, and it's hard to cover all of them, and we've each provided leadership wherever we can. But one area I've been a little bit involved in is the sustainable growth track. And two particular areas. One is the concept of livable cities and what makes livable cities. And the second is another one that's very relevant to us in the Philippines, which is around disaster mitigation. And let me just talk a little bit about both. As Doris said, this is a community of countries coming together, trying to set an agenda where we all raise the bar for each other. And so on the issue of livable cities, I think there's an interesting phenomenon of which we're well aware of in the Philippines, where cities have become major driver of economies. But with that density that has led to many positives, density does actually result in more imagination, more cooperation, and more dynamism, and that's why cities areas are really major drivers of an economy. Come the problems of that density as we live through here in the Philippines. And so at gatherings like the Livable Cities gatherings, we talk about what are the elements of infrastructure, water, sanitation, health, that will enable cities to create more density, but live through that difficult period and really create, I guess, an environment that is conducive to people's standards of living going up rather than going down. On the disaster mitigation side, I wasn't able to attend the ministerial gathering on that front, but both Bill and I have tried to provide some leadership in the private sector coming together in the Philippines, following new global standards of the role private sector have in helping organize and cooperating with government to mitigate, I guess, the effects of disaster over the long term. And in gatherings like this, APEC gatherings, there's a lot of sharing of ideas of different models that are taking place globally and how people are coordinating. You know, there's so many anecdotal examples, but on the energy field, which interests you, I had the opportunity to sit down at the energy meeting with the Undersecretary of Energy of the United States, who's an old classmate. And she was saying that in the United States, there's a lot of coordination between the private sector and the public utility in the United States. And they've come up with structures where they run through scenarios well in advance of any problem, so that the day a problem hits, they know who the key coordinating people are. And she was saying, you know, any time that the Philippines would like to have a working session with them, she would gladly arrange it just for exchange of information. And that's just one touch point among many that can take place as people come together to share ideas and how to cooperate and how to plan for the future. So I'm a great believer in everything that's happened. It's been an honor to have the Philippines hosting it this year, and I think a great deal has happened throughout the year. Maybe one last element, but I think it's more for Bill to talk about, which was instituted under the leadership of Doris, is that there have been parallel tracks where private sector have been more engaged at the ministerial gatherings than ever in history. In the past, ministers used to come, meet at an APEC leader country, go through the issues, and then leave. Here in the Philippines, and perhaps Bill can talk a little bit more about it, there was a parallel track of private sector groups meeting at the same meeting as the ministers, and then dovetailing with their recommendations to those ministers. It's been wonderful, and in the gatherings, Doris encouraged the free flow of dialogue rather than a structured one, and actually all the ministers got very engaged, so it was great. But maybe, Bill, you would be the right person to expand on that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Jaime. One of the things we wanted to do this year with APEC was we wanted to expand the engagement of the private sector with the government. APEC has been a series of government meetings at ministerial level, leaders retreat, senior officials, and over the last several years, we've been slowly opening it up so it has more opportunities for meetings with the private sector. So ABAC itself, in the first meeting of every year, meets with senior officials, and that kind of sets the tone and the agenda for the year moving forward. For the Philippines this year, we proposed, and our government, as the chairman, accepted and agreed to do it, that we would have a series of ministerial CEO roundtables at every ministerial meeting. So aside from their own closed-door meetings, they always carved out a little time for CEOs, and we were able to bring in CEOs to speak with them from all over APEC. And this happened for quite a number of meetings, the Trade Ministerial Meeting, Energy, Transportation, SME, Life Sciences, disaster management officials, finance officials. So now the interchange became a lot more interesting, and I like to think more useful, not only for business but for the ministers themselves, because they got to hear directly from what CEOs are saying, what they see as trends, what they see as priorities, what recommendations they might be able to give. So a very free and great exchange of ideas. We've actually documented them all together with the help of PricewaterhouseCoopers, and we'll publish these reports electronically in November, in another week's time. We've also been able to work on a few sort of larger studies. One of the cities, one which Jaime mentioned and led as the co-chairman of the Sustainability Working Group. And with PricewaterhouseCoopers, we selected 28 cities across APEC, developed a set of metrics, measurements on livability, sustainability, and competitiveness of these 28 cities. And then using this scoring system, able to see create a diagnostic tool, what makes a great city great, and what other cities can do to learn from each other and build great cities. That's the direct impact on the Philippines, because we thought if we learn what makes a great city great, and the title of the report was in fact called Building Better Cities, then we can then get our mayors to begin to think, what does it take to build better cities? We can't run the country on 3 cities. We're 100 million people and 7,000 islands. We need 20, 30, 40 cities all moving at the same time and growing in a really well-managed way. And that requires a lot of planning and good implementation skills. So getting them together, if you ask, what's in it for us? We host APEC, what can we learn? Well, we can pick up on these things and learn. Same with the services agenda. We found that technology, demographics, all sorts of trends are changing the world in ways unimaginable 5 or 10 years ago, such that work is getting redefined. Where does it take place? Who performs the work? How is the work even performed? And so it's leading to the emergence of what we call a new global worker. The Philippines is really in prime position to meet that new global worker challenge. We have people, we have a young population. If we invest in education, we invest in their health. If we position ourselves properly in the services field, that is the roadmap, I think, that you were asking about, Dax. We can do something. We didn't want to make the whole APEC exercise just a freewheeling discussion of things. We need to extract lessons from this and use it in the Philippines to make a better country. I think that's the value to all of us, the man on the street, what makes APEC relevant to all of us. Not just hosting and not just a bunch of meetings. We need to translate stuff that leaders talk about and ministers talk about and turn it into something of value to the business community, to NGOs, to workers, to the man on the street, to ordinary citizens. That is what inclusive growth is all about.
Thank you. So a wealth of lessons to be picked up. Ben De Vera, our finance reporter, has a question.
Hello, good afternoon. Of course, APEC had been very supportive of the Cebu Action Plan, which was drafted by the Philippines, spearheaded by the Philippines, the Department of Finance. And it was eventually approved by the finance ministers last September. Well, of course, it is aimed at making the region's financial sector more integrated, also transparent, resilient, and also to foster infrastructure development. But then, of course, APEC is non-binding, so we cannot really compel member economies to really implement all those measures in that roadmap. How would the private sector, how would APEC ensure, well, not compel, or maybe pressure the respective governments to really push through with this roadmap?
Yeah. So it's non-binding. How do we compel them to toe the line?
I think what we've learned out of this whole, sometimes, I must say, I've been at APEC for quite a long time, and I must say, sometimes it takes quite a long time for things to get through. One is across APEC, and then the other one challenge is basically integrating all the plans across the border. The other one is also how the adaptation takes place within economies behind the border. I think a lot of this, when you ask the question about sustainable, access to water and food, all these things actually, and including finance, access to financing for infrastructure, the massive infrastructure needed. A lot of this will happen because it really is becoming a major demand. It is not anymore something nice to have. I think a lot of the areas around quality and sustainability agendas are now becoming very serious needs. So just on the area of disaster financing, for example, these have become really real. As a matter of fact, that Cebu Action Plan also covers the needs of the MSMEs, their ability to actually bounce back through micro insurance, disaster risk financing, a lot of these things that are being led really demand driven. And I think that is the best way to get something going. We had a meeting in one of the ministerials on energy, and of course, everyone's looking at what is the sustainability roadmap as far as energy is concerned, food security issues. Some of these may be do you choose between just cost or do you choose between sustainability and efficiency, right? So in some economies, they put value to some aspects of it. Other economies just put values to cost. But at some point, every economy is going to have to face themselves and say, am I going to let this just run off without really a very courageous policy? So I think to answer your question, this is going to be, the world is changing. One mega trend that's happening is disasters. And at some point, business will see the need. And there will be such a demand for it, it'll happen. So sometimes you wait for policies, and other times it comes from demand. So I think some of them are a little bit more complex recommendations, but Bill talked about the new global worker. APEC Philippines has presented an initiative asking for a more managed framework for the mobility of people. So far, it's a very hard subject for anybody to talk about. But as demographics change, as the population start aging, as countries are needing to have workers from across the region, at some point somebody's going to have to say, you know what, this is an important issue. So it comes from that, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question from. I'm sorry.
To the finance question. I think this issue, actually, I think what makes APEC strong is precisely the fact that you don't have a set of rules that you have to abide by. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but we live in a world that's very interconnected. Countries want to have their own way of structuring themselves, and if everything becomes binding, like the WTO was, then actually you never get any agreements, because it's very hard to get, call it 21 nation states to come together and agree on something. That's very hard. However, what brought APEC together to begin with, you go back to its initial reason for being, was a grouping of economies that said, we want an open system of trade. We want a free flow of goods. We want, as much as possible, a low tariff, free flow of skills, services, and people in a way that is conducive to a global trading system coming alive. And everyone along those economies felt that that was in the greater good of the world than having a nationalistic closed system. That's where it all came from. So if that's the mindset of the leaders, generally, and economies are driven these days by good economic policies, you would think that the natural tendency is for leaders to want policies that naturally uplift their country rather than bring them down. So if that's the mentality, and most leaders these days win elections based on a desire to take the country forward, then it becomes a wonderful platform to learn from. And so you take something like our educational system and the debate around the K-12. I've always been shocked that there are people against K-12. I mean, you cannot get a job anywhere in the world, and here we are so proud of our country having a global workforce. How can you have a young person without an educational structure that is accepted by your neighboring countries? It's unthinkable to me. I mean, you're giving them the very tools to be able to get work abroad. So the moment you have standards like that, as a country, you don't need to be told, we demand that you have K-12, although to a certain extent it's happening, because they say, we won't give you a job if you don't have a K-12. I mean, because there has to be an acceptance of your standards. So by the tide, basically, I think, as Doris was saying earlier, lifts all the boats. I mean, you have standards that are beginning to be accepted globally in this open system. And as a country, you're saying to yourself, I don't need to be told that I have to conform. If I don't, I'll be the loser in a world that's increasingly interconnected. So to me, that's the benefit of APEC, that there is a mechanism for dialogue, for participation, for sharing that actually lifts everyone. And I think the facts and the statistics have proven that in the last, call it 50 years, this interoperability between trading systems and an open system has really taken the world economy forward rather than backwards. And so it's a unique opportunity for countries to say, here's an opportunity. It's like going to school. I either grab what I can learn and participate and subject myself to the new standards that are being set and have a voice in setting those standards, or say, I want to stay out of it. And it really makes so much more sense to be part of it. And that's, I think, the beauty of APEC. And
So,
on the financials, of course, there's so many elements, sub-elements to that. No?
so member nations actually get in line voluntarily rather than being forced to do it.
Well, that's what I would argue, Dax, and I think the three of us have been witness, and Doris even more so, as she's traveled around the world to lead the APEC meetings and actually has the longest member of APEC in our group. You've really seen that people, number one, want to participate, they want to learn, and there's a natural tendency, some stronger than others, but the general tendency is to want to learn from each other, conform to each other's standards, come up with some global standards, and it's almost a system that the very dialogue and the meetings themselves lead to standards continuing to move up. And I think that in and of itself, maybe I would argue, is better than a rules-based structure where you're spending years trying to conform to certain rules which you may not eventually even lead to. And maybe just to add one last thought to that, I think that's why groups like the WTO have had such hardship in reaching agreements, yet
Yeah.
bilateral
Right.
agreements, ASEAN agreements, everyone's reaching
Faster.
agreements so fast,
Yeah.
you know? And I think it's more that. Anyway, those
Understood.
are my thoughts.
Our next question from Paolo, our award-winning reporter. All right.
Sorry. Yeah. You touched on trade facilitation and breaking down barriers, but these are the same topics that were discussed in 1996 when we came up with the Manila Action Plan. Could you describe how much progress we've made since then, and what makes you hopeful that we'll make progress after this year's APEC meetings, considering that arguably the most important piece of legislation that we should have prioritized was the competition law, and we're still talking about customs modernization, and it took us 20 years. Can we be faster this time?
Yeah, some items have not moved as fast as they should have over time, but I would say if you take a look at the nature and the color of the discussion in APEC from the time we hosted, say in 96, 19 years ago, when a lot of the focus was on trade facilitation and items like that. If you take a look at the scope of discussion today, it's much wider. So it's moved away from sort of almost exclusively trade to a lot of developmental areas. In 96, no one talked about resilience. No one talked about human capital. No one talked about education or disaster management or healthcare, life sciences, food security. A lot of those topics are on the table today and have surfaced only in the last few years. So I think there's a recognition that we need to look at the world in a lot more holistic approach rather than purely trade. That it helps trade, but it's not the only thing that will help trade. We need to look at, lowering tariffs doesn't automatically raise trade. We need to look at a whole range of other factors. Connectivity is a new area coming in. Urbanization was not even discussed as recently as 2 years ago, and only now became elevated, slightly elevated within APEC, and only next year will continue to be elevated to a higher level. Disaster management is not even a full ministerial meeting yet. It's a recommendation to the Philippines that it should be raised to a full ministerial meeting. So it's come a long way. I think for the Philippines, we have not reacted as quickly as we should to some things like the competition law, and others did not fall into place sooner. It eventually did, but it took a long time. So I think we need to take a look at what are the world trends and ask ourselves, if we want to get on that train, we better get on that train a lot faster. And I think this is the lesson we should draw now that we're chairman again of APEC and host, and see the full range of discussion and see the potential it can give the country. I think we should move faster.
Just a follow-up question on that one for Ms. Doris. So you've been with ABAC for a while. I've been wondering, do other member nations have issues with executing their particular roadmaps, or is this a particular Philippine issue?
I think there's some economies that for me are always stand out as the real the economies that really understand the opportunities of these open markets. As a matter of fact, when I first joined ABAC, I was asked because I was a woman, because they wanted a woman there. So I went, and I honestly swear I didn't even know that it was all about free trade. At that time, I thought, well, free trade might be really bad for us. So I ran straight to the Mexicans and the Chileans, and I said, this is good for you? And they looked at me like completely shocked and said, oh my God, don't you see it has opened the markets for our goods, right? So I think other countries, for example, one economy for me that's so amazing is New Zealand. New Zealand has 3 million people and 33 million sheep. So they know they have to sell all that pork, the lamb chops and the butter and their wine. They know they have to sell it to someone else out from New Zealand. And so that, for me, is a really great example of an economy that knows clearly how to take advantage of this. The other aspect that I wanted to remind everybody is, for example, if you're in China and you see how this whole free trade policy has changed the landscape of China, I think today their trades are $3 trillion a day in terms of what they trade on the internet. Internet, e-commerce. E-commerce has transformed China, whether it's domestic trade or whether it's trade across borders. And you see the growth of Alibaba types that have really created this platform. Now, you might say, how does APEC help that? Well, without the thing that makes this inclusive growth so amazingly possible today is because there's this thing called technology, which didn't exist 10 years ago. But today, they really leveraged on the possibilities of technology. And they said, we're going to make this happen. We're going to use our everything available to us that something like a regional integrated market allows. So you can have your goods cross borders. You can have, as a matter of fact, since China did not have all the structures in place, they didn't even imagine what credit card was and all this. They made it up. And I was explaining over lunch that somebody said, well, we have such lousy delivery systems here. I said, I had a dinner once where one of the Chinese platform founders, Diane Wang, was the speaker. And when people said, oh my God, we have no delivery systems, she looked incredulously at everyone and said, oh, in China, we use bicycles. So in other words, when you have the will, you find the way. And it is really all a mindset. It's a mindset of, I'm going to use these potential markets to get there. And guess what? Now I can use this thing called technology to get there. Whether it's going beyond selling to your community, to a Manila market, to another market within the city, within the country, or whether it is really to aim to have the standards that are really good so that you can actually trade using the e-commerce. So this whole APEC thing sounds a little bit like, because you're looking at big mega statistics. I'm looking for real ways that these have transformed the way people do business. And this, I hope that this hosting, I think the most substantive thing that can happen is that we all leave from this hosting with a new vision and a new mindset about the possibilities beyond our borders.
Dax, let me try to answer your question in an indirect way about which countries move fast and slow. Okay? Here's my observation since I came back to APEC and ABAC in 2011 after having left in 96, 97. The countries that really execute well are the countries where I see the business delegation and the government have a lot of open channels for discussion on what policies best suit their country and best suit their strategy. Okay? what happens is we find that when we go to these meetings, their private sector people know exactly what their government policies are and the stance. And when we meet the government guys, they know they've been briefed what their private sector is expecting. Years ago, for the Philippines, if we went abroad and you ask us what the government position is on something, we would not know. If you ask a government person years ago what they thought the private sector position was, they probably would not know because we did not have an institutionalized channel for discussion. One of the things we started in 2011 was regular meetings between ourselves and ABAC and the government officials. And we meet quarterly with our senior officials. We meet at least once, twice a year with the ministers, Secretary of Trade, Secretary of Finance, who deal with these issues. We brief the president once a year before every APEC summit on what the positions are. So it's become institutionalized, and we're on the phone, fairly regularly, email or phone or text, so that we're exchanging information. So this year, if you take a look at the agenda between ABAC, the country's own APEC economy priorities, and the APEC CEO Summit agenda and the SME Summit agenda, you will see a very common thread running across that. I think years ago that was not possible, but this open channel is good, and that will ensure that we move faster. It's no accident, I've always said, why credit ratings, competitiveness ratings, the economy, they're all moving up. There's greater coordination and collaboration than I have ever seen before.
Fingers crossed. Another question from Tina. Probably go ahead.
Actually, that's my question, speaking about coordination, all that. How now do you think the 2016 elections will impact on all of these plans on APEC, given our propensity to always start at the beginning and then, there's no continuity with our, with the executive. When it changes, everything changes. So how do you see 2016?
Well, I think there's a lot more institutional memory right now that exists. Things are documented because of social media and the internet a lot more and a lot better than they've ever been before. And, the markets tend to push demands much more strongly now that I think any government in the world that tries to buck the trend, sometimes that is, they do so at their own peril. So I really think that these trends will continue if they're a real true trend, and you can't ignore them.
Can I add to this, please? Because this is why this year we really push for our roadmap. So hopefully we have some of the roadmaps finished, hopefully. But aside from that, one of the things that we want to do in December is to come up with a few documents that would be lessons learned from this whole initiative. So one is a general lesson as far as commitments to regional integration, commitments to some of the things that we need to do. For example, very often you hear that we can't be eligible for TPP because there's things that are not possible. So I don't know, maybe we have to really look and see what are some of these elements that we need to change internally. Just do it stuff, right? And then the other two that I'm kind of determined to do more than the others, I think really important, is to come up with some kind of documentation, not us, but in a bigger group, around SME, the governance around SMEs. Because I see in other economies, their SME initiatives are really pretty strong. Like you look at a very good model is the Malaysian SME Corp. We have a lot of SME initiatives. There's an SB business. There's the Go Negosyo law of Bam Aquino. All the different departments have an SME initiative. So kind of I feel as if we should just try to put and connect the dots somehow. But the other one that's really important, I think, is this whole idea of an innovation agenda. I think where we're pushing APEC through one of our key recommendations and it was also included in the SME ILO action plan on innovation. And we feel that one of the greatest drivers of future economic growth is innovation. And unless we ourselves have a very clear innovation strategy, it's building an ecosystem, which includes education, like not just K to 12, as Jaime said, but STEM, helping all the young kids in this country believe, wow, math and science is so cool, okay? And then really pushing engineering and ICT in education, pushing for really a very rationalized program with the DOST. The DOST is doing a great job. It's just it's all different. It's all many people doing things without sort of an overall thing. They're doing a lot of funding of university-led laboratories, R&D, but that has to be really supported. Maybe university-led incubators, like Jaime's group has a private has an an incubator activity. Real support for this kind of efforts, intellectual property protection, venture capital, the whole ecosystem, and most importantly, what is our digital infrastructure? I believe that everybody has a right to water, light, electricity. Pretty soon, that right will extend to a digital access, because that'll give the greatest opportunity for everybody to have education through the internet, research through the internet. It'll allow a farmer to know what's going on with his weather and his crops. And most importantly, it'll allow young entrepreneurs and startups to have a chance to be creators rather than just consumers of goods and services in the future. So I believe we are saying in ABAC, every economy who does not do this is going to be out of the picture. And so for the Philippines, we need to create our little plan, and we hope we can write this up and walk around to every candidate and say, you want to buy this or not?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dax. I'm sorry, we're running a lot late. But I think Tina's question is the perfect segue. Really, the first questions have to do with the impact of APEC on business and the economy. Now we want to move to the impact of APEC on the ordinary citizen. So I think we're starting. Let me just throw to you, if I could ask Mr. Zobel de Ayala, we have a question from our Cebu newspaper, Cebu Daily News. So they've held two very important APEC events. The question is, after all the disruption, what can the Cebuanos look forward to? Can I expand that and maybe ask you, so next week, there's going to be a lot of disruption of our regular schedule. What are we looking at on the other side of that disruptive week?
I think the best way to look at it is that disruption is just a small element of a much bigger picture. And I think we started the discussion today of saying what have been all the benefits of participating in this dialogue. Believe it or not, there are many countries that are not part of APEC that really want to be part of APEC and are desperately seeking it. One country in particular that Doris and I are aware of is Colombia in Latin America. It's not an APEC country. The president's coming all the way here as a visitor just to try to participate and be accepted. That's how much people want to become a part of it. So as it is, many of the benefits we've been discussing, and I think our country has done a great job in hosting because they've actually spread a lot of the meetings throughout the country, and a number of them, as you said, took place in Cebu. And there was a chance for people, senior people, to witness Cebu firsthand, stay at the hotels there and have a chance to see the city firsthand. The only one that I think was disrupted was Iloilo. There was one typhoon, I think, Bill, no? On one occasion that everybody had to come back to Manila, and I think we ended up in Tagaytay. But I think just the exposure that the country's had, I think there have been something like 40 to 45 ministerial or sub-ministerial meetings that have taken place throughout the country. That exposure alone of different parties to the country is already a big step. Number two, I think we have to learn as a country to host big events. The world is increasingly interconnected, it's global. Exchange of information and movement of people and convening is part and parcel of a mature, growing economy. This has forced us, as other gatherings have done, to just host. And hosting should be a natural strength of our country. We're very service-oriented. We're a welcoming people. We all speak, to a certain extent, a great deal of English in the country. it should be a natural. And the fact that we're making people feel welcome, many will be coming to the Philippines for the first time. I have yet to find individuals who've come to our country and not fallen in love with it. But before they come, sometimes they have a negative perception of one kind or another. I think all of those alone, in and of themselves, create an openness. When you visit a place, you get a chance to get to know it at a deeper level than just reading about it or hearing about it. So that in and of itself has been positive. And then just the chance to provide leadership in a global setting. Our minister level, our president, our business community, to lead the discussions, lead a CEO conference. This is part of becoming a grown-up in a global economy. And there are things we should get used to. And if we can't compete with the grandioseness of a country like China, we can compete with warmth, with hosting people in our homes. There are many elements that make us a tremendous asset. So as far as the Cebuanos are concerned, which is what you mentioned as a second most important city in the country, it will naturally benefit from an influx of awareness, tourism, hopefully, and business that will flow into the country, I guess, as part of the APEC agenda.
Thank you. We have questions, if you don't mind, we have questions from social media. A lot of people have been tweeting their questions. I'd like to call on our social media editor of the Philippine Daily Inquirer, Feza Mora, to maybe read one or two questions.
I have three, pwede. I'll make it quick, no? This question is from Super Jeremy. The question is, please ask your guest to describe the Philippines in one word. Just one word. Maybe it is something about the state of the economy.
Can we do that? Maybe.
Ladies first, if you don't mind.
I think Philippines, talented.
Thank you. Okay.
I'd say warm.
Warm.
Not in temperature, in terms of feeling and interaction.
Okay.
Yeah.
And,
I would say vibrant.
yeah, I think that sums up how we feel right now. So another question here is, it starts with who, but I will rephrase it. What kind of a leader do you think would help push the Philippines to get on the train and get there faster, as Mr. Luz said? The original question really is, who is the best candidate to me? But it's partisan, so I'll rephrase it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think personally that one of the things that has held us down is that we kind of focus a little bit on what we don't have. And I use the word talented because I think more and more, I mean, listening to Jaime talk and Bill about all the things that we can truly be great at. I think I think the greatest thing a new leader should be is not afraid to have a very positive vision. I think that leader has to be a connector. I think it's enough already finished that we have to sort of find the difference between. We do have challenges, mind you, we really do. We have a lot of people that are not participating. You know, we have actually different cultures in our country. There is one sector that's the business, the haves, and then those that have less. I think we need somebody that rallies everyone towards a common goal. I think we've had too many leaders that always sort of, it's one versus another. I think there's so much opportunity in front of us. It is not us against each other, but it's us as the Philippines against the opportunities this world offers. So we have to feel competitive. We have to create a new vision for people to feel their participation. You asked the question, how does it affect the man on the street? It is sometimes a difficult question because you say, you know, it's disrupted a lot of the capacity of the Filipinos. It's hard to compete outside. But maybe if we have a new vision of how we participate, maybe we cannot be competitive making things, but we have to make it better, more creatively. That's where we compete. Or maybe we offer something else, maybe a service that others cannot. And so we can end up buying goods cheaper, because that's what one of the benefits of this is we're able now to buy cheaper goods, right? So I think that's why I started by saying that leader must have a vision, must be courageous to to unite everybody towards a common goal and must not be afraid of really putting strategy in front and making everyone believe we can do it. Yung kayang-kaya natin. That's what I would vote for.
Maybe one element that I'll add in terms of what we need. I think a whole issue of governance has been set. I think this president has drawn a line in the sand and said we have to become a serious country with the way we run it, and I think he's achieved a lot. I would argue that the next president, if they want to add and build on that while keeping that standard, is to really work on creating an environment that creates employment. If you look at the surveys of what people are ultimately looking for, they want to be employed. Young people want a chance. They want to work. If they have to go abroad to look for it, they'll do so. But in the end, you look at the way people talk, they want to move, and the requests I get, can you move someone from a contractual position to a full-time position? People are hungry to work. But you cannot have employment without investment. And the one area that I think we can move a notch, we've had a great economy, we've had a stable macroeconomic environment, but we're still low on the scale of investments. And that's investments made locally and investments brought in from the outside. If we can raise the needle on that front and have a leader that creates an investment climate that actually takes us up to a whole different level of activity, with that will come employment. And employment will be a massive driver of people's happiness, people's self-fulfillment, and will be self-fulfilling from an economic point of view as well.
Do you still have a third question?
Yeah, the last question from Sherwin Nones. He said that growth in RP is seen in the numbers, yet many are still not feeling it. I think this is related to leadership. Why is this so? Where is the gap, or what is the gap, or who is the gap? What? I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. We've had GDP growth, and what we're finding is that the poverty incidence figures, have not moved down as much as we would like to have moved down. And I think that tells us that curing poverty or reducing poverty is much more complex than any of us ever imagined. And in fact, I was a bit stunned to find out that when OECD did a study of the global economy with over a 10 or 15 year time span, they found that there was global growth, and yet the gap between the haves and the have-nots also expanded over that same period globally. So this is a very difficult task or challenge for us, and it's very complex. I go back to what Jaime said. I think the key for us, the key path out of poverty is job generation. We have to focus on generating those jobs, whether we have it in manufacturing or agriculture or services. So the key item, the jobs. The second priority tied to that is create the jobs in sectors that generate productivity, because that essentially creates wealth, that creates family income. We need to be extremely focused on that. So to go back to your question about what type of leader do you want going forward, essentially it's like you ask everybody, what kind of a boss do you want to, work for or be with?
Has reported recently that the rising temperature due to climate change could drive 100 million people into poverty. My question is, do the problems of global warming might also be the issues to be tackled during the APEC? And do the business sector, or how do the business sector mitigate this problem, or could help mitigate this problem of global warming?
Well, we actually, there was actually, that it's actually a very, very important part of the APEC system. That's addressed by both the energy ministers as well as the meeting that Bill mentioned, which was on disaster resiliency. And there are some target commitments by leaders within the APEC system on keeping global warming up to a maximum of 2%, is it?
2 degrees.
2 degree, I mean, 2%, 2 degrees. We're all scared that we may not make it. But some of the recommendations by ABAC is to put more incentives for investment in renewable energy. So, for example, one of the recommendations is to remove any non-tariff barriers and barriers to the movement of environmental goods and services. And so there's a lot of, we will distribute later our ABAC recommendation book, and you'll see there a whole section under the sustainability part about all the recommendations from the business sector. So what we're saying is business actually would like to invest, but a lot of government policies still put more value on the cost of energy sources. So a lot of things are still on fossil fuels as the one that is still cheap. So so a lot of this is a play between policy and actual investment incentives. Jaime, do you want to say something, or Bill, to add to that? But it is a very important part. Very important part.
I guess you could say that much of the detailed discussion and the really in-depth discussion will take place in Paris at the climate change talks in December. But there's a realization that for all of us in the business community and across many governments, in fact, is that we live essentially in a climate-defined future. And I think we spend a lot of time on the WWF board and the advisory board, which Jaime chairs, talking about how, and Sandy's on that board as well, but this, how climate affects all of us in the future. So that's at the back of our minds. And so we're trying to look for practical ways to address this. And just maybe I'll give one simple example is that, you know, when you start talking energy, it's always, you know, production and fuel mix and things like this. But we really ought to be looking at, we have discussed other things like energy efficiency and conservation and more energy efficient design for buildings and plants and things like this. So those also contribute to you know, mitigating and to managing that the climate change risk. So we have to discuss it in many ways, but at all times I think we need to be very practical, that these are really doable, practical things to do.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say something which I know Charlie's been very involved with. When we had the disaster ministers meeting, I asked the Americans, the FEMA, I said, is it really changing a lot? He said the biggest challenge is, of course, climate change, but the biggest challenge also presents itself because the biggest populations are now in cities. So it's really just a matter of sheer numbers that are affected when things happen. I just wanted to say that he's been working a lot on disaster response.
Perhaps before we call on Mr. Zobel de Ayala for the closing synthesis, I'd just like to ask, is there a question that you would have wanted us to ask, but we failed to? Is there something that you want to say about APEC that we haven't yet touched on?
Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
I was thinking that the next few weeks would be really our opportunity to present the Philippines in the greatest light. And I was just going to ask, how can we get all the media to rally together with sort of a very positive spin on the Philippines, you know, just to really agree that let us put the best light forward. Is that hard to do?
I think that's a very good question to end the forum on. Actually, the question comes from our CEO. We do want to find out what else we can write on. Some of the some parts of APEC, actually most APEC events are not seen on the media radar screen. I mean,
Well,
there's a lot that's going on,
Right.
and we reduce them to headlines like, you know, we might reduce today's forum to Jaza calls on next president to focus on employment. You know,
Yeah.
You know, we're working with headlines. I'm sorry. Yes.
No, I just wanted to say that one of the problems in that exactly because, as you said, the words end up becoming just narrowed down to the. What maybe would be great is, now we've talked a little bit about the substantive part. The inclination could be that it becomes very event oriented. You know, ABAC organizes the CEO Summit with a lot of leaders speaking, and then we organize the SME Summit on innovation. And then, of course, the leaders meet, the ministers meet. The business sector kicks off. ABAC kicks this off starting on Friday. So Friday over the weekend, business sector. Then the Minister of Trade is on Monday. Then the leaders start coming, CEO Summit, SME Summit, and then the leaders dialogue with a picture of all of them in their outfit, right? So it tends to be kind of like just event. What would be so nice would be kind of to also put a little emphasis on some of the initiatives that are trying to be driven by the Philippines this year, which is really this inclusive growth agenda, bringing more people into global trade, trying to really get the man on the street see that there is relevance to all this. I think that would be great. I mean, if you can I change your question? Instead of what question do you want to have been asked, maybe it's a question on what's our wish list, if that is possible. Of course, write about all the other things, but if there could be also some parts of what both the Philippine government and us as the ABAC hosting have been working on all year to achieve. That's my wish list.
Thank you. We're really out of time, so I think we should call on Mr. Jaime Augusto Zobel de Ayala for the closing statement.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you to all of you for the three of us and our fellow colleague Tony Tangcaktiong to have a chance to interact with all of you and tell you what we've been up to is a privilege. So thank you also for your time. I'll keep this very short. Bottom line, I think all of us here in ABAC, if I can paraphrase the discussion today and just bring it down to some basic paragraphs, is that we're believers in an interactive trade system. We believe that our country, as a part of it, has a role to play, and it will be good for us. So I would like to think that the three of us here and Tony are supportive of a Philippines that is clued in and interlinked into the global economy. So we start with that. As a subset of that, I think Doris has mentioned that there are many components of a global economy, but we have defined a role for ourselves, as Doris elucidated, on the trade and services side and the inclusive growth side. We put that as a focus for the Philippines this year, and we've built an agenda around it among the very many that are there. But that's not to say we're not supportive of the other components of the agenda that include infrastructure and many other elements. But the focus has been on trade and services and inclusive growth. Bill talked about something that I think the Philippines has done a great job at and has brought us forward, is this alignment between government policy and private sector policy. I know that may sound like a basic, but it did not really exist in the past. And the three of us have been quite structured in how we meet with government counterparts and exchange notes, come up with a common agenda, and try to move forward with a common agenda between the public sector and private. And Undersecretary Lula del Rosario has met with us on a regular basis, and in the end, I think, as Bill pointed out, it has led to meetings with the senior ministers and the president himself. So there's been some commonality of spirit. And finally, on my end, I talked about a number of issues, but in the end, anything along the lines that we've discussed that makes us stronger as an economy, encourages more investment, and a capacity to take up our standards to levels that give people comfort to invest here, I believe will lead to employment and a more successful economy long term. So I hope I've done some justice to the conversation today. But again, thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We're actually inspired by something that Doris also said about the need to create an institutional memory. I think we in the media need to also learn to play our role. Our reporting will form part of that institutional memory. It's been we've had a vibrant discussion. You've been a very warm audience. We have extremely talented resource persons. Unfortunately, we have to call it a day. We'd like to thank our speakers, Doris Magsaysay Ho, Jaime, Augusto, Zobel de Ayala, Bill Luz, for taking time to be with us. We have a small token of our appreciation. The Philippine Daily Inquirer is celebrating its 30th anniversary a few weeks from now. Unfortunately, all the economic leaders will be visiting the Philippines about 2 weeks ahead of our anniversary. Otherwise, we would be inviting them. But maybe we can host the Colombian president.
John, can
Yeah,
I pass
sure.
this on as our ABAC report for you to study? And while you work on some of the substantive reporting, this
Mm-hmm.
might be a good help. It's also online, so can I
Okay,
give it
thank
to
you.
you?